So anyway, I think Kamala might be gaining some of that momentum. I think Kamala has a shot. I think that she's doing a great job, and she's an experienced politician. You know, she was the Attorney General for California, and I think that that makes her as qualified as anybody else. She's as qualified as Joe Biden, and certainly more qualified than Donald Trump. But then again, I got a 9-year-old in the house is more qualified than Donald Trump, so that's not really saying much. And and a lot of people like her, you know, and I think it's cool. And then and it's funny because I empathize with what she must be going through, because on one hand, she's got to deal with people like me who ask questions that people don't like to hear. Like I honestly, Tierra, I see Tierra KJ Williams is here. Tierra's my girl. She's a brilliant like filmmaker and stuff. A really good friend from Los Angeles. So Tierra, I just asked the question. I said, so if you're a black woman and you go to an HBCU and you meet all these black men, how do you end up married to a white guy? I didn't say it like, oh my God, how dare you be married to a white guy? I just said, how did that happen? Like, what happened? And I believe you can learn a lot about a person by looking at their relationships. I don't care what nobody says. So I looked at her relationship with Willie Brown when she dated. Y'all know about that, right? We talked about that last week, where she dated Willie Brown. She was 30 and he was 60. I was like, wow, that's a big age gap. Like even for, usually it's the woman who will date the older man, but it's 30 years older is a big. I mean, that's huge. That's like the person who's old enough to say, I mentored your parents. You know what I mean? Like I was the older uncle to your dad when he was a baby. Like I changed your parents' diapers. Like 30 years old is a big gap. Like my dad's 18 years older than me. You know, so we're almost like peers, you know, like they're like older siblings. But seriously, ladies, I'm curious. Ladies, let me ask you this. If you were 30 and you met a great guy who was 60, like getting, you know, he's getting letters from AARP and shit. Like, would you date a man who was 60 years old when you were 30? Yes or no? Just tell the truth. Come on, quit lying. Come on, tell me the truth. What do you think? Would you date a 60-year-old man when you were 30 years old? I'm not even gonna ask the men, because most men I know, if you're a man, you can feel free to answer. But most men I know, I know when I was 30, like 60 literally made me think about my mother. The idea of being with somebody my mother's age still makes me want to vomit to this day. Not because my mama ain't wonderful and beautiful. It's just a lot. Okay, I see a lot of no's. Okay, so when I saw this, right, you know, I just, you know, my instincts kicked in. Y'all know me. I'm just going to ask the real questions. I'm like, I wonder what was up with this. And so here's what I concluded. I concluded that it's not a coincidence that Willie Brown was one of the most powerful black men in the state of California and probably in America at that time. It's not a coincidence that he was enormously wealthy. It's not a coincidence. I mean, if you look at the kinds of jobs and appointments that Kamala got at that time, these were like really important jobs she got. And people were like, well, damn, like what is on her resume other than the fact that she's fucking Willie Brown? Like seriously, like people were asking these questions. This is what people were saying. I wasn't saying it. I didn't even know about it. I wasn't even thinking about Kamala back then. But seriously, that's what people were asking. Like, they're like, okay, you're on the medical review board, but you have nothing on your resume that says you should be on the medical review board, right? And so really what I think, you know, and then if you really do, you know, sort of 2020 hindsight, you'll see where that relationship with Willie Brown definitely opened a lot of doors for Kamala, helped her kind of, you know, get into places that she would have had a hard time getting into otherwise. And it is what it is. And is that something I judge necessarily? No, I don't. I don't think it necessarily is. It happens all the damn time. You know, in fact, there's actually people that believe that your relationship should improve your life on some level. That's why, you know, a lot of women have a hard time dating a man who makes less money than them, because they're like, what the hell can you do for me? Like, I could be broke by myself, right? Men, we're not always looking for that kind of thing. We're looking for other stuff, right, from a woman. But the women are kind of looking for something from a man, either make me smarter, make me richer, make me more secure, like something that's going to enhance my life. If you can't be an enhancer, then you got to go. Now, I think that with Kamala's case, it was confusing to me because it was like, it was a lot. If it was like 30 to 45, that'd make sense. 30 to 60 is like, we're gonna get this money, right? We're gonna make this happen. Like I am hyper ambitious, and I would marry a one-legged frog if I had to in order to get ahead. That told me that she was super ambitious, that maybe she was like a young lady that just said from an early age, like one day I want to be governor, one day I want to be president, you know, like that's really important. And people who think that way, they usually achieve their goal. Kamala is very, very smart. And somebody says, wasn't it just an affair? It wasn't a affair too, but Willie was married, but he wasn't really married, if you know what I mean. A lot of y'all, in case y'all don't know, if you ain't never been married, just know half the marriages that you know about are pretty much dead marriages, and dead marriages to me are where people are pretending to be married, but they're really not. Willie Brown had a dead marriage. Like I'm just giving you the honest truth. And so in the dead marriage, Willie was he was a player. He had his women. He bring the young pretty girls and all this other stuff to the events or whatever. And they had like a relationship. Like they would go to several events together, and then people knew about it, right? So anyway, so I fast forward. You fast forward to if you look at Kamala's economic history, Kamala was doing okay financially. Up through the time she became Attorney General. I think that when she was Attorney General, her income was about 130,000, which is a lot. It's a lot of money for most regular people. But in California, you make 130K, you're kind of California is so expensive, right? And so it's not like she was balling, but she could pay her bills. She could drive a nice car. She could live in a decent house. But then she goes to on a blind date, and they introduce her to now, mind you, she's a beautiful woman, right? She's a beautiful woman. Beautiful woman. So she's probably met a lot of brothers along the way. She's probably met a lot of dudes that could, were probably like decent guys or whatever. But she meets this Doug Emhoff guy, and they hit it off, and they end up getting married. Like I think less than a year later. And you can't tell me. I would bet every penny in my bank account that him making it over $1 million a year probably got her attention. Being like, oh, so tell me more about yourself. Hey, you're so crazy, you're so funny. You know how girls get when they start, they like you, and they just like every joke, everything you say becomes like hilarious, and you become the most interesting person in the world. Yeah, so I'm sure that's Doug got that treatment because Doug had, he was making over $1 million a year. And I think around 2014, what they did was when they sort of did the investigation, they always investigate what the candidates were earning financially, and they looked at Kamala's economic history, and they saw that around 2014 her income just sort of popped, right? Because before that she was making a certain amount of money as the Attorney General, and then she became a senator not long ago. I think she became a senator after she married Emhoff, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody tell me if I'm wrong. And I wouldn't be surprised if Emhoff operates in the political space. He's a lawyer. He makes big money. He's probably got big connections. It probably helped her to achieve that next goal, even though being Attorney General of California is a pretty powerful position too. So let's not pretend like he did it all. I don't think he did it all. I think that she did a lot of her own. But in 2014, their joint income, when they filed taxes jointly for the first time, jumped to about 1.2 million. So it was an economic come up for Kamala. And now here's the thing though. It's not, and Doug is also Jewish. Mario's mentioning that. Some people may think it's anti-Semitic to even bring it up because you know how they, the Zionists have like the whole anti-Semitic, accusation space like on lockdown, where if you just put their name in your mouth, you're accused of being anti-Semitic. No, this is not anti-Semitic. This is just factual. He was Jewish. And the Jewish community has an extraordinary amount of influence when it comes to banking, when it comes to media, things like that, when it comes to politics. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, at least this was true up until recently. Think about this. The Jewish community, if I'm not mistaken, is about not even 5%, I think 3 or 4% of the American population. But 1/3 of all Supreme Court justices have been Jewish. 1/3. And now think about this in contrast. Black women, there are twice as many African American women in the United States as there are Jewish people, twice as many. And in the over 200-something year history of the Supreme Court, there has never been a Black female Supreme Court justice ever. But there have been tons and tons of Jewish justices, right? And that comes from the fact that it's all a power move. When you saw Obama, for example, nominate Elena Kagan for the Supreme Court, Elena was from Harvard, Obama was from Harvard. All the Harvard faculty rallied around to get Elena Kagan onto the Supreme Court. It was about preserving and protecting power for a specific group of people. So anyway, so here's the deal. The thing is that there are a lot of interesting power dynamics that happen behind the scenes. There are people that can put you on top. There are people that can give you opportunities. There are people that can open doors for you. And I think Kamala has a nose for who those people are. And it's because of that I believe that Kamala actually has a good shot at being president. It's also because of that that I don't always trust her completely, because I believe that she is a person who will say what she has to say in order to get into the White House. That much, that I do believe. If you go back and you just listen to everything she said, who she's talking to, and how she sounds, she really is good at shifting her game based on who the audience is at the time. And so, you know, the most recent allegation of pandering, which I'm not going to call it pandering if it's true. If it's true, if it really happens, then it's not pandering. But if it doesn't happen, then that means you were pandering, right? But she goes to the Essence Fest, and suddenly she really becomes a black woman again, like in a major way, and basically announces a $100 billion home ownership program that she says is for African Americans. But the problem is, when you look at the fine print and you look at what is actually being proposed, there's nothing in there that says African American in there. There's nothing in there about African American people. It's really you know, sort of racial justice by proxy. It's sort of like, okay, we're going to help poor people and working class people, which is kind of what every Democrat in the history of all Democrats has ever said. We're going to help the poor, working class, middle class, whatever, middle class families that make below a certain amount of income, blah, 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 blah. And then what they say, oh, and by the way, black people will benefit too, because black people are disproportionately in the economic toilet. Well, you know, the problem with that logic, obviously, is that, number one, most black people, a large percentage of black people, if not most, I believe it's most, are not in the economic toilet. Most black people are not poor. That's just, you know, a fact. Doesn't mean that we don't have a lot of poor black people, but poverty and blackness are not the same. In fact, tell me, if you consider yourself to be a person who's not poor, say it. Just say, I'm not poor, or say yes or no. Yes or no. Do you consider yourself a person who is not poor, who's not in the poverty space? Yes or no? Give me a yes. And if you are poor, then you can say no. If you are not poor, say yes. Okay. It's not poor. Okay, I'm seeing not poor. I'm seeing a lot of not poors coming up, right? You know, now, you know, maybe I just, you know, on my channel I attract a bunch of bougie Negroes. I don't know. I don't think I do. The bougie Negroes seem to hate me, honestly. The Chicago elite, they can't stand my black ass. But you know, but the thing is, when you're talking about something that truly represents racial justice, I think we have to elevate and mature the conversation and stop believing that blackness is the same as poverty. Every black person is not, you know, living in a homeless shelter. Every black person is not getting a government welfare check. Every black person is not, you know, like struggling to buy shoes for their children. Doesn't mean that those individuals in that category shouldn't have support and empathy and respect and dignity and everything else that a human being deserves. But when you tell me that, oh, we're going to help black people because we're going to help poor people, that's not the same as helping black people. That's just white people being white. That's just white liberals being white liberals. That's what white liberals do.